for joining us, especially the members of the media today. My name is Ronald Tatenda Magumo, and I'm from the National Association of Youth Organizations, NAYO, an umbrella association of youth organizations that are working from across the 10 provinces of Zimbabwe. And we are here today with the NAYO Zimbabwe Board Secretary, Dr. Prolific Mataruse, as well as Ms. Diana Harawa, to issue out a statement, on the shrinking of civic space in Zimbabwe. So this is coming, as part of the celebrations of the International Human Rights Day, which were celebrated on the 10th of December under the theme Youth Standing Up for Human Rights. So we are here today to issue this press statement. And the procedure that we shall use is that I will allow the NAYO Board Secretary, Dr. Prolific Mataruse, to issue out and read out the statement to us. Thereafter, then we'll take some questions if there are any. So I'll leave this moment to Dr. Prolific Mataruse. Dr. Prolific, sir.
Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome you for honoring this invitation to come to today, and just to inform you that this is a follow-up exercise to what we have done before. We have presented a petition to Parliament in the past and are set to present before a relevant parliamentary portfolio committee. And this is part of our celebration, commemoration of International Human Rights Day. We are hoping that the media can help amplify what we are doing here. And it's a constitutional mandate, we believe. So our statement is on the shrinking civic space in Zimbabwe. So we are united as an umbrella association for youth civil society organizations in Zimbabwe, working towards repositioning, redefining, and enhancing the role of youth in community and national, regional, and international developmental processes with a membership of 184 organizations. We are gravely concerned by the continued shrinking of civic space in Zimbabwe. That is the exercise of freedoms to assembly and association, as seen by the enactment of the Maintenance of Peace and Order MOPA Act, which is a replica of the Repressive Public Order and Security Act, and the arbitrary blanket ban on civic processes and tabling of bills before Parliament that seek to further place restrictions on civic space and the freedom to expression. We are outraged that more than 80% of the world's population, that is 6 billion people living in 111 countries, face a situation where either the conditions are closed for civil society, this is like 23 countries, or where civil society is highly repressed, that's for 35 countries, to which Zimbabwe falls under, or where civil society faces substantial legal and political obstacles. This is 53 countries. This information is coming from civic civil society monitor. There is little chance in these countries for a fully engaged and mobilized civil society, which is an essential foundation for democracy, human rights safeguards, and progress on the SDGs and for Transformative Agenda 2030. We are also acknowledging the importance of civic and political rights, which through the enactment of the 2013 Constitution empowers citizen rights holders to claim their rights as guaranteed by the state, duty bearer, which the Constitution providing for freedoms to association and assembly through Section 58, which states that, we read, we quote it, every person has the right to freedom of assembly and association, and the right not to assemble or associate with others, close quote. And further guarantees in Section 59 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe the right to demonstrate, where it states that every person has the right to demonstrate and to present petitions, but these rights must be exercised peacefully, close quote. We are maintaining that the United Nations member state to which Zimbabwe is part of must act to reverse the closing and shrinking space for civil society, stop the attacks on human rights defenders and the undermining of democratic participation, and renew the prospects for an inclusive Agenda 2030 and the full realization of the SDGs. We are worried by the increasing number of civil society leaders, activists, and human rights defenders that are being charged under various charges which include subversion of the state for exercising freedoms provided for within the Constitution and the slow handling of these cases by the courts of Zimbabwe. And we are cognizant of the vital role which civil society organizations play as an independent development actor and partner for development as articulated in the Nairobi Outcome Document of 2016 and the Belgrade Call of Action, which makes clarion call for the reversing of closed and shrinking civic space for civil society, launched on April 8, 2019 in Belgrade, and endorsed by 135 civil society organizations representing more than 60 countries worldwide. We, therefore, as an umbrella association, implore the government to, without any further delay, enact the necessary legislative measures that guarantee the exercise of freedom to association, expression, and assembly by taking concrete steps to protect and enable the space for civil society, including enabling laws and regulations, democratic accountability based on human rights norms and human rights standards, and the full protection of civil society under attack, such as social leaders, human rights defenders, and gender equality activists. Government, through Parliament, should repeal the Zimbabwe Youth Council ZYC Act and replace this with a more pro-development and inclusive legislative framework for youth in the country that brings to life Section 20 of the Constitution, which focuses on youth. Increase commitment to implement the recommendations from the Motlanthe Commission of Inquiry, especially those relating to the conduct of the security sector, given the recent scenes of police brutality, legislation on law and order, freedom and liberalization of the media. We also call on the government to uphold the Nairobi Outcome Document agreed at the high-level meeting in 2016 and Busan Partnership Agreement, which recognizes civil society, NGOs, as an independent development partner in its right, working within national policies and towards poverty reduction, tackling inequality and the commitment made by governments to develop policy space and an enabling environment for the formation and operation of civil society organizations, NGOs. We call on the government of Zimbabwe to progressively respect, protect, and fulfill the freedoms to assembly and association by expediting pending cases before the courts in connection with the exercise of freedoms to assembly and association, and drop such charges leveled against civil society leaders and civil society activists. NAYO remains committed to sustaining the participation of young women and men in development and upholding the promise of youth. An enabling environment is cardinal in this and the observance of peace. I could just add as well that these things we are talking about are things that are in the Constitution and are sacrosanct. These are things that are inviolable. We have put them in our Constitution and we should respect them as a nation and as a government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Prolific Mataruse, for issuing out and reading out that statement on behalf of us. At this particular moment, we will invite some questions from the members of the media, if there are any questions. Thank you. Okay, yes.
My name is Lucy Yasin. I'm a freelance journalist. In your statement, you are calling for government through Parliament to repeal the Zimbabwe Youth Council Act. Why so? What is the problem with the current act that you are disputing, calling for the repealing of that act?
Thank you very much, ma'am, for that particular question. So that current act, we have been working with various young people from across the 10 provinces, and part of the issues that also are emanating from that particular act is that young people from the provinces of Zimbabwe do not particularly view the Zimbabwe Youth Council Act as a body that is serving the interests of young people on a non-partisan basis. So the history on its own, or for instance of the ZYC, is not necessarily assisting young people to fully participate as enshrined under Section 20, that whatever act that must be put in place must be national in character, which will be also inclusive to young people from within the province of Zimbabwe. So as part of the work that we are doing as NAYO, on the efforts to repeal the ZYC Act, we have also come up with a shadow bill, which is not necessarily the Zimbabwe Youth Council Act, but which is termed the Zimbabwe Youth Act, which we have worked with a number of consultants, and we also moved from across the province of Zimbabwe in consulting young people on what must be constituted in that particular Youth Act. And part of what young people are also saying with that Youth Act must speak to, for instance, the powers of the minister. They must be reduced and not necessarily focus on the minister as an individual. So those were some of the inputs that young people were inputting to that particular process. So we have submitted that particular petition to the Ministry of Youth, to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Youth, as well as to the Zimbabwe Youth Council, as part of efforts, to ensure that this particular act that is disenfranchising young people is repealed. Thank you.
To also add on what he's saying, a police cannot work on its own without a backing of an act. So that's why we are calling for the government to repeal the Zimbabwe Youth Council Act, because as it stands, the police, yes, it can call for the ministries to have youth desks, but it cannot be implemented without the backing of an act. So an act is there to ensure that the Zimbabwe youth policy come to fruition.
And also, in the spirit of alignment of laws, it's not just the Youth Act, but a raft of policies that are still to be aligned. The Constitution is advanced in many respects. You can talk of women's rights, the gender parity issues it talks about. These are issues that are still to take life in the laws. So I'm aware that a number of organizations, including government organizations, those Chapter 12 institutions, they are trying to ensure that in the relevant sectors they work in, the laws are aligned with the Constitution. So what we are doing is simply saying it's important for the Zimbabwe Youth Council Act and other relevant acts to uphold. These are subsidiary laws. The Constitution of Zimbabwe says that this is the supreme law of the land, and any other law that is inconsistent with that shall be void to the extent of its inconsistency. So I think we are really, this is where we stand on, and it's a high moral ground, and I think it's the right course of action to take.
Okay, are there any further questions? Okay, yes.
You also making reference of the MOPA, Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, that was recently enacted. And you are saying this is also added into the continued shrinking of the civic space. This act, when it was a bill, there were meetings that were consultations that were made. Did you make any contributions towards MOPA before it was enacted into an act?
Thank you very much for that question. So on behalf of young people, yes, we were also mobilizing youth from across the provinces to attend, such meetings that were being held, and also submitting, young people were having their caucuses where they would discuss on the ideas that they will need to push during such meetings. And indeed, we were mobilizing young people from across the provinces to attend such meetings. And surely you can confirm that young people were attending, the meetings and adding their voices to those deliberations that were taking place.
There's a tendency in Zimbabwe where young people and women are used as mouthpiece of political parties or politicians. When they were contributing, was it their meaningful contribution concerning their space, or it was parroting somebody's views?
So I remember during the making of this constitution in 2013, I was part of it. There was the debate on who should lead, the politicians or the activists, the NCA in particular. So I remember one MP eventually saying, this constitution is not people-driven. These are driven people. It's not people-driven. These are driven people. So I think you managed to capture something that is still a reality of our politics and society. That people, you're right to use the word parrot, what they are told. And unfortunately, I think given the economic situation in the country, it has taken away some sort of independence and autonomy from people. So people would rather speak to a certain tune. And also, interesting to note is the level of apathy that exists as well in the people. So the people that show up to the meetings are usually people who are converted to one side, or they are linked to one particular inclination. So the risk of parroting is really there, and then debate is stifled. There is a debate that happens. So in the end, what we have is a mirror of the parliamentary positions, the political configurations in the country. They just duplicate and replicate themselves. So that's a challenge. And I think as NAYO working in civic space and civic education, we are trying to say, let's move beyond these usual domains, our usual normal political categories, to actually think and start thinking on our own. I know for similar organizations like Citizens Manifesto who are trying to have initiatives outside the two political parties and political formations. And I think it's really important that we begin to have that. People need to think for themselves and to tackle these things. So it's not just mobile alone which is a problem. It's a problem across the board in many sectors, yes. Actually, the same people you hear contributing in these meetings, if you were to listen to them outside, most of them don't even believe what they're saying. Yeah. So I think it's also partly because of the space. Speaking out is not an easy exercise in the country. Yeah. So I think progressively it's going to become easier and people are going to become bolder. So we are talking of people that have been arrested for subversion of the state or something like that. So if you become too vocal, there is that risk. And people have seen examples when you see the beatings, the violence. So I could give you an example like 3 days ago when police at Makoni they started beating people for nothing, vendors and everyone who was just walking there. These things contribute to civic space. So there's assembly in the form of these meetings that we have, civil society meetings. But then there's general assembly where people want to just freely move, people to freely be able to do their things. But then when you have those arbitrary, uninvolved actions of violence in that form, I think you actually have a problem. Then people become self-centered. You just teach yourself what to say. But unfortunately, when the new dispensation came on board, the environment promised to be open, and I think it was open. And I think in many ways it's still open than the old dispensation. But I think as the economy has continued to shrink here as well, and to be tough, the political crisis in the country, we are seeing a resurgence of certain attitudes and tendencies that are from the past. And I think it's important for us to actually raise the flags and remind the government of its constitutional mandate. To say this is a constitutional mandate. It's our law. It's our own law. It's not the law of the United States. It's not the law of the UN. But this is our law. And it's something that we need to respect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
My last question.
Okay.
You speaking of raising the red flags, you have identified all these problems and challenges. What's the way forward as NAYO, and what should be the way forward as a nation? If you go to Zambia, for example, civic education is part of the curriculum. And when a Zambian kid grows up, they know who they are and what they should get and what they shouldn't get. What's the way forward as a nation, and what are you putting forward as NAYO is the way forward?
Okay, so I would maybe respond to that firstly, then my colleagues will then add. So as NAYO, we are also representing young people in the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission under the committee on thematic committee on members of special interest groups, and we represent young people in there. So as part of the work that we are doing, we are also, flagging out some of these, violations that are being, done, and also assisting, with legal representation, working with Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights on young people who are, arrested and who are having their rights violated under, the continued shrinking of civic space. But in the long term, yes, like you rightfully said, it is also our wish to see, an environment that remains open for young people to participate. Because, for instance, Section 20 of the Constitution rightfully states that measures must be put in place by government and all relevant stakeholders to ensure that young people meaningfully participate, not only in the economic sphere, but in the political sphere, and as well as in the social sphere. So, as part of the broader framework, having, a civic education in our own curriculum also, remains a critical component. But the politicization now of civic actions or civic engagements by young people remains a challenge, and that is also part of the work that we continuously, also sharing with the relevant stakeholder to say this is an important area that needs opening. So in also representing young people, for instance, in the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, we are also pushing to say, as young people, we are critical, agents of social change, and we are also key stakeholders in terms of peace building. And we must be involved in all, it could be, national discourses that are taking place. We are talking of the need for a national dialogue. Where to place young people in that particular dialogue? Are young people even being considered? But we are constituting more than 67% of, of the total population of Zimbabwe. So as part of the broader framework, yes, we also understand the importance of civic education, that it must, be curtailed in the learning curricula for young people to, to grow up, being cognizant of their civic, rights that they have. So I think even my colleagues could add if there is any questions.
Yeah. Okay, keep going.
I think I would just add to what he said. I think as NAYO, it's our role to push our government when the education bill is being tabled against to Parliament. I think it's our role to push for civic education to be part of the curriculum. But I think the government, they're doing deliberately not to push for civic education in the curriculum, because they want young people to keep on pushing their agenda. Young people are always caught up in spaces that are not defined by them. With the recent march against sanctions, some of that young people, they didn't understand who are affected by the sanction. So I feel the government, they are doing it deliberately not to teach young people about civic education. I think as now we need to push out through the enactment of the Education Act bill.
So also, I think for I agree with what the colleagues are saying from my end. But since my experience is doing politics, I think one thing that I've realized is that the people that actually show up to do certain things actually influence the agenda. And when you ask, do you show up when more power is being made? I think it's a very important question. These things don't happen by themselves. The difficult part is actually in influencing the process itself. So you show up first, then you do the hard work to make the hard suggestions on what should be done. So curriculum reform does not happen in Parliament, unfortunately. Curriculum reform happens in other spaces. So as NAYO, it has been our mission to stay involved and engaged with various actors. I think yesterday at the press conference on water, you find these are areas that we believe are important. Education, we have engaged with Action Aid around educational issues. And I think for my work at the university, I really see there's an opportunity right now for people to actually step up within the confines of the restrictions that exist in the country, the shrinking space. But there is space. Yeah, it's not yet obliterated totally. There is some space for some mobility. And I think in taking advantage of that space, some changes will be done. So the challenge to NAYO, the challenge to other activists, and other people that just want to see Zimbabwe improve, I think is also to show up, not to allow this situation to suck our strength, to drain us of our determination, our hope. It is only through hope that we are likely going to contribute something meaningful. If we are just going to surrender this thing to the politicians, I think it's not going to be good. And someone said that how can you surrender the most important thing, which is the running of your lives, to certain individuals? So I think if we are going to show up as now, increasingly, and I think that we have a team that has been showing up to these activities and will continue to show up from various sides. And also, having worked from the side of the university, I think I'm learning something that you need to engage various stakeholders. These things are multifaceted, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. They are crossing across so many sides, so many factors. So no one organization can be able to deliver. But what's important is that we have people, some may call them change agents, I don't know, but we have people that instigate, that stimulate, and trigger the change. Then things it becomes a ripple effect going forward. It's not going to be easy. I think when people got independence in 1980, they thought it was going to be an easy process. But the Americans have been independent for 300 years, but they're still to get the formula right. So I think it's really something that we need to continuously engage in. We don't have to take the Constitution, our freedoms, and whatsoever for granted. It needs to be defended continuously.
Okay, thank you very much for those responses. And do we still have any more questions from the members of the media? Okay, it seems as if there are no more questions, so it leaves us to thank you very much for joining us for this particular press conference that we're having. Thank you.